Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the speakers and attendees. It's with utmost pleasure I introduce today's webinar on the topic Climate Resilience, Bridging the Gap Between Multi-Hazard Modeling, Technological Solutions, and Community Capacity, jointly organized by the University of Trento, Italy, and the C20 India 2023 Working Group, Sustainable and Resilient Communities, Climate, Environment, and Net Zero Targets. The working group is led by Dr. Manisha Sudhir, Provost, Strategic Initiatives, International Research and Innovation, and the UNESCO Chair on Experiential Learning for Sustainable Innovation and Development, who serves as the India Coordinator. Professor Vinod Menon, Founder Member, National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, Government of India, who serves as the International Coordinator, and Dr. Adishivan, Chairman of Amriteshwari Foundation, Malaysia, who serves as the International Coordinator. We're eager to begin, but as is customary in India, we always commence activities large or small with a prayer seeking grace so that our goals may be accomplished bereft of any obstacles. I now invite Mr. Vaishak to play the prayer. Thank you.
ध्यायामो धवलावगुण्डनवती तेजोमयीं नैष्टिकीं स्निग्धापाङ्गविलोकिनीं भगवतीं मन्दस्मितश्रीमुखी वात्सल्यामृतवर्षिणीं सुमधुरं सङ्गीर्तनालापिनीं श्यामाङ्कीं मधुसिक्तसूक्तिम् अमृतानन्दात्मिकाम् ईश्वरी.
Thank you, Mr. Vaishak. It's now my utmost pleasure to introduce the moderator for today's event, Dr. Giuseppe Formetta, who serves as the Associate Professor, Department of Civil, Environmental and Mechanical Engineering, University of Trento, where he works on multi-hazard impact assessment in the alpine regions, influence of bedrock structures, variability on the hill slope hydrology and stability, analysis of blue-green infrastructure for more sustainable urban drainages. He embodies the perfect bridge between technological development and its adoption, and so is the perfect moderator for today's event. I would now like to welcome you on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hari, and thank you very much to all the people that organized this event. And I would like to start with a short introduction to the webinar that we are going to attend. Particularly, the objective of these events is to bring together experts from academia, think tanks, and private and civil society organizations to present an overview of the current strategies and tools available to address climate resilience and challenges thereof in adopting technological enhancement for prediction, modeling, warning, and risk communication. The dialogue will explore different techniques and modeling approach to increase the climate resilience, with an emphasis on community needs and co-design aspects, as well as discuss their strengths and limitations, to highlight the role of international cooperation and the potential for innovative climate resilience mechanisms. The idea, let's move to describe a little bit the format of the webinar. In particular, we have the pleasure to have 4 distinguished speakers from Italy and India who are experts in the field. Each of them will have 15 minutes in which they deliver their talk, followed by a short question and answer part. The event then will continue with an open house where we invite speaker, but also audience member to deliberate on some very important question that we will disclosure to you later on. Moreover, to collect as much as answer is possible, we will also be circulating a Google form consisting of those questions I was speaking before for all the participants, and so to help them to respond to the questions. So I will move to the first speaker, which is Dr. Lorenzo Giovannini, which is Associate Professor at the Department of Civil, Environmental and Mechanical Engineering at the University of Trento, Italy. Lorenzo's research interests include the study of atmospheric boundary layer processes typical of mountainous regions and the evaluation of microclimate alteration induced by urban areas, by means of both numerical and experimental campaigns. He has been involved in different research projects focusing on improvement of meteorological simulation over complex and urban terrain for different applications, such as pollution dispersion, renewable energy, and building energy consumption. Today, the title of the talk that Dr. Lorenzo Giovannini will give is Cities, Urban Thailand and Climate Change, Adaptation Strategies to Improve the Environmental Quality of Urban Areas. So, if Professor Lorenzo Giovannini can share the screen and the slide.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, very clearly.
Okay,
so the stage is yours.
Thank you, Professor Giuseppe Formetta for the introduction, and in particular for your kind invitation. It's a very pleasure to talk here about these important topics. So, as you can see from my title, I will talk about, let's say, environmental conditions inside urban areas, with a particular focus on microclimatic conditions inside the urban area. This is a quite important topic in view of the particular conditions that are usually present inside urban areas, which I will see later can be completely different with respect to microclimatic conditions outside urban areas, and also connected to the expected climate change that will increase the vulnerability of urban areas. So in these 15 minutes, I will try to give you an overview of the main problems which are related to microclimatic conditions inside urban areas, and also show you some of the possible adaptation strategies that can, let's say, mitigate the effects of urban areas, so improve environmental conditions inside the cities. So why we are talking about urban areas? So why urban areas are so important? Actually, they cover just a small fraction of land area. So as you can see from this slide, more or less 3% of land areas. But in these 3% of land areas, we have more than half of the world population, and this percentage is continuously increasing. And moreover, most of human activities are concentrated inside urban areas, with 80% of the gross domestic production and 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. So we have a concentration of activities, a concentration of emissions. In particular, we are talking here of greenhouse gas, but not only. Also, for example, pollutant emissions are usually concentrated inside urban areas. So it is important to evaluate microclimatic conditions inside urban areas, because microclimatic conditions inside urban areas will affect, for example, energy consumption in buildings. Microclimatic conditions inside urban areas will affect the comfort of the urban population, but also there can be situations which can be critical for the public health of the urban population. And in particular, this is due to the fact that inside cities, the climate is different with respect to the surrounding rural areas, and this is directly connected to the alteration of the surface with respect to natural areas. In particular, we have the so-called urban island, which is a phenomenon in which we have higher temperatures inside urban areas with respect to the rural surrounding. So as you can see in this simplified scheme, usually we have higher temperatures inside the city center. In this case, we have 6 degrees, a temperature which is 6 degrees Celsius higher than the surrounding. And this is mainly due to the fact that the city is different with respect to a natural area. In particular, we have release of heat due to different human activities. So we can have, for example, heat released by traffic. We can have anthropogenic heat released from heated or cooled buildings. We can have anthropogenic heat from industrial activities. And so, of course, this is an additional source of heat which is not present in other natural areas. And then another important factor are the, let's say, the physical properties of the urban surfaces. In particular, the fact that the urban surfaces are, let's say, can store more heat with respect to natural surfaces. And then in cities, usually we don't have a great availability of water or of moisture. And so we have a lack of vegetation, lack of evaporative cooling, and also due to the lack of vegetation, usually a lack of shading, in particular shading, for example, provided by trees. So, for example, here you can see building materials store solar heat and release at night. So we have different factors, and due to these different factors, usually we have higher temperatures inside cities with respect to the surrounding rural areas. Just to show you an example, I will show you an example of an evaluation of the urban Italian for my city, the city of Trento in Italy. Trento is a small city, in particular compared, for example, with Indian cities. It has just 100,000 inhabitants. And so we can expect that the effect of the urban Italian is not so strong with respect to bigger cities or with respect to mega cities. Actually, as you can see, for example, from this graphic, from measurements that we performed in different parts of the city, we have that example here in this graphic. You can see on the y-axis the intensity of the urban Italian, so the temperature difference between the urban area and the surrounding. And in particular, you can see that here during the night, these are an average cycles of the temperature differences between urban and rural areas. We can have differences up to 5 degrees between the city and the surrounding. So you can see that in a very small city like Trento, we can have 5 degrees of differences, which is a lot actually. So you can imagine what can be the difference in a more populated city. So in bigger city with more release, for example, of anthropogenic heat. Another important thing that you can see from this graphic is the fact that the urban Italian is usually mainly a nighttime phenomenon. So the difference between urban and rural areas happens mainly during the night, while during the day, in most of the cases, the differences are close to zero. This is actually, we don't have time to enter into these details, but this is actually directly connected to the characteristics of the urban material. They store heat during the night, and then they release this heat during the night, so with an increase of the differences with respect to the countryside during the night. As anticipated before, we can have different problems related to the fact that we have higher temperatures inside the urban area with respect to the surrounding. Actually, again, we don't have time to enter into details of all the problems, but one problem is for sure connected to the thermal comfort of the population, and in particular the public health, in particular for the layers of the population that can be more exposed to this kind of problems. So this is, for example, a graphic representing the situation which occurred during a famous heat wave here in Europe in 2003. And in particular, this graphic focuses on the city of Paris, in France. The dashed line represents the maximum temperature during the summer 2003. The continuous black line represents the minimum temperature, again, during the summer 2003, while the bars represent the mortality in the same period. You can see that it is clear that there is a strict connection between heat waves and mortality, and in particular during a strong heat wave at the more or less mid-August 2003, so with very high maximum and minimum temperature, at least for the climate of Paris, we had also a peak in the mortality. So this is an important factor to take into account, the fact that you can have the interaction between heat waves, the urban heat island, and one of the problems is the fact that these problems will be more and more common in the future due to the effect of climate change. We all know that the temperatures are continuously increasing all over the world, and so it is clear that we'll have more and more and long-lasting heat waves, especially in warm and hot climates, and these can interact with the urban heat island, causing important problems for the population. So, for example, here in these two maps, which are produced by the European Environmental Agency, you can see the projected increase in the percentage of summer heat waves in two scenarios: a low impact scenario, so with, let's say, a reduction in the emissions of greenhouse gases, and on the right, in a high impact scenario, so with, let's say, a continuous emission of greenhouse gases, which unfortunately seems nowadays the most probable scenario, in the sense that at the moment the emissions of greenhouse gases are increasing. So you can see that from the colors in particular, that, for example, in particular in the southern part of Europe, but this is of course varied also for other climates, there will be an important increase in the percentage of summer days classified as heat wave days. And as I said before, we have to consider that then these heat waves will interact with the urban heat island. And so here you can see we have in the same map, again produced by the European Environmental Agency, both information about the heat island of some cities with the points, and the projected number of extreme heat waves in the next 30 years, according to an high impact scenario. You can see that in particular in the southern part of Europe, so in the hottest climate for Europe at least, we have a high number of projected number of extreme heat waves, which can interact with important values of the heat island, in particular in this case over the Po Plain, so this north part of Italy. What are the strategies that we can try to evaluate to adapt the cities to these problems, to mitigate the effect of the urban heat island? Well, we can try to change the characteristics of the city, because we have said that one of the main problems of the cities is the fact that there is a lack of vegetation, a lack of evaporation. So we can try to improve the green fraction in cities, for example, with parks, with trees, with different kinds of green strategies. So there are different kinds of, for example, nature-based solutions that can be used in cities in order to try to restore, let's say, the natural exchange of heat between the urban environment and the atmosphere. At the moment, this is, for example, again, taken from a report of the European Environment Agency, the percentage of the area, let's say, of green, let's say the green area, which is present in different European cities. You can see that in some cities we have an important percentage of green areas. So some cities are, let's say, ready to face the effects of climate change, while in other cities, in particular in the Mediterranean area, we have a lack of vegetation. So in particular, so in the cities which are expected to suffer more due to the effects of climate change, we have a lack of vegetation. I can show you now a case study for the city of Verona in Italy for an application about the potential effects of increasing the green fraction inside urban areas. Here there is a simulation performed with a meteorological model. Also here I don't have time to enter into details of the simulation, but you can clearly see that in this part of the city we have higher temperatures. This is during daytime, this is during nighttime, with respect to the surrounding countryside. So it is clear the effects of the urban heat island. What we try to do with the meteorological model, which is a technological solution that can be used in order to evaluate the effects of different adaptation strategies on the urban climate. We change the real situation, which is this one, and we try to evaluate what can be the effects of different scenarios, for example, this one, in which we increased the vegetation inside this part of the city of Verona with different, let's say, scenarios, with different strategies for greening the urban area. And again, without entering into details, we found that, of course, increasing the green fraction inside the urban area, we can obtain a significant decrease of temperature with average decreases up to 1 degree, for example, in this area when we decided to implement, to change the land cover from a railway part of the railway station to a big green area, a big park. So there are different, let's say, planning strategies, urban planning strategies that can be used in order to try to decrease the effects of the urban Italian. And then there are also other technological strategies involving, for example, roofs, which are an important part of the city. So also in this case, with the presence of green roofs, the implementation of the green roofs, the strategy is to improve the vegetation, to improve the green area, to improve the evapotranspiration, so trying to decrease the temperature, increasing the evapotranspiration. The effects of green roof, as you can see from this scheme, taken from a report of the USA Environmental Protection Agency, is the fact that not all the heat provided by the sun, so the solar radiation, is transformed into sensible heat, so in heat which increase the temperature of the urban atmosphere, but part of this energy, part of this radiation is transformed to latent heat. So it is used to for the evapotranspiration, and so as you can see, we have less sensible heat, so a minor increase of temperature of the urban atmosphere. The other strategy that can be implemented is, for example, the use of cool roofs. Cool roofs are, let's say, exploit the fact that some kind of coatings with some particular colors, for example, white, as in this case, have the ability to reflect most of the incoming solar radiation, so they have a higher albedo, higher reflectance, and so they keep the surface cooler than a traditional roof. So to conclude, I will just show you just the last example, an implementation, again, with a meteorological model of different scenarios with green roofs and cool roofs in the city of Bolzano, again, in the northern part of Italy. This is a map of the city of Bolzano with the different types of roofs. In particular, these kind of roofs, in particular green roofs, are easy to be implemented above flat roofs, for example, in this southern part of the city, which is the industrial part of the city. So we try to simulate different scenarios in which we implemented in over flat roofs different kinds of technological solutions, green roofs and cool roofs. And here you can see the results. So covering 50% of the flat roofs of the city with green roofs obtain this decrease of temperature. Covering 100%, so all the flat roofs of the city with green roofs, of course, we obtain a more important decrease of temperature. And here on the right, it is the same solution, so the same percentage of roofs, but in this case, not covered by green roofs, but covered by cool roofs. And also in this case, you can see that, especially in the southern part of the city, which is the part of the city more, let's say, in which the flat roofs are more present, we obtained an important decrease of temperature. Also in this case, you can see that this kind of solution can be important adaptation strategies to adapt the city to climate change and so to mitigate the effect of the urban Italian. So that's all from my side. So thanks for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Giovannini. I would we have time for 2 questions. So if question arises from the audience, please do not hesitate to ask. In particular, you can write it in the chat so that I could read and make the question to the speaker. In the meantime, I would do one short question to Professor Giovannini about some modeling implementation of the differences between green roof and cool roof, for example. One of the main differences.
Actually, I said before, I haven't time to enter into details, but for these simulations, we used a very widely used meteorological model, which is called the Weather Research and Forecasting Model, WRF, which is developed mainly in the United States at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. But recently, we have contributed to this model with new parameterizations for evaluating the effects of green roofs. Well, the effects of cool roofs can be simply simulated just changing the albedo of the surface. So inside the model, you can change the albedo of the surface. So in that way, you can simulate the effects of surfaces with, for example, a different color, a different efficiency in reflecting solar radiation. Green roofs are a little bit more complicated because there are also different types of green roofs with different types of vegetation. But again, in this model, we created a new parameterization which is able to take into account all the exchanges between the green roof and the atmosphere in different conditions, so also taking into account different vegetation, different kind of the substrate of the green roof itself, and also taking into account the fact that the green roof can be irrigated or not. So it is a rather complex parameterization and it was released just last year, but it is a very good solution, a good option to take into account the possible effects of adaptation strategies in urban areas.
Thank you very much for your very clear answer. And I will move to the next speaker, Dr. Vinitaa Apte, founder and director, Terre Policy Center. So Dr. Apte is a founder and director of the Terre Policy Center, which implemented several projects on environmental education, solar energy, and awards for innovation at the grassroots level under her able leadership. She implemented projects on women and energy in rural India and empowered thousands of women. She has started as first ever online environmental Olympiad to make digital India stronger and make aware students at any early age. Women and youth empowerment are the focus of Terre. Dr. Apte was working as a consultant at the United Nations Environment Program in Paris and developed media strategy on outreaching strategy for social media and implemented also the PPP model. She is author of 7 books, over than 7 books. One of her books is incorporated into the university curriculum for Bachelor Arts of Student Arts. The title of the presentation, which Dr. Apte will deliver today, is what are the ways in which community climate resilience can be enhanced using modeling and technological intervention? So thank you very much to be here, Dr. Vinitaa Apte, and the stage is yours. We probably cannot hear you. At least I cannot hear you. Okay, probably now. Can you try?
Hello.
Perfect. Now we can hear you very well.
Now, can you hear?
Very well. Thank you
Fine.
very much.
I would remove my headphones so that you can hear. Yeah. So thank you very much for the nice introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to all these people on this burning issue, we could say. So if anyone can share my presentation.
Okay. I will do that. PPT.
Is there my presentation? I have sent it. Anyone
Yeah.
is inserting?
Just 1 second.
Yeah. Okay.
And fine. We will do it for you. Okay. No, it's not. It's not this one. I have it eventually. If you allow me to, can I share it? No. Is this one, no? Can you see it?
Yes. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So my today's subject is community climate resilience, modeling and technological interventions. We are, next slide, we are facing with the problem which always at our doorstep, and we look upon it like it's our own problem, as well as the cities and the other things which are there with this great problem is having one. So when we see about the climate change, and when we look at it through the grassroots level, and the students, when we are talking to them, it always comes up like that how we ask and how do we know what climate change is real or not. So these are some of the things which we can say the climate change is real, because we experience the global temperature is rising. The ocean is getting warmer day by day. The ice sheets are shrinking. Glaciers are retreating. Whenever we go in Alps or anywhere in Himalayas also, there are a very small glaciers are remaining over there. Snow cover is decreasing. Sea level is rising. Arctic sea level ice is declining. Extreme events are increasing in frequency. This is the very important point, that extreme events means there could be natural calamities, there could be man-made calamities, but there could be any kind of worsened situations coming in front of us every day. And then the last one is ocean acidification is increasing. So this is the graph which is showing you what the current level of all these problems, and we could sensitize it how we are facing with the climate change. Next slide. So the whole damage caused worldwide, when we talk in the billions and millions of things, or we are talking about the global level, the damage caused is 3.3 billion people's daily lives are highly vulnerable. And so in all countries, if we can get some kind of data, there are 3.3 billion people have already suffering with this highly vulnerable situation. And 15 times more people are likely to die from extreme weather than in years past. Global temperatures rose about 1.85 and 1 centigrade from 1901 to 2020. Increasing magnitudes of warming increase the likelihood of severe, pervasive, and irreversible impacts. So these all we are facing, and we could hear, means the media is so strong, we could stay somewhere at the corner of the world, and we could get everything which is going beyond, or with the good things also we could get it. But normally we heard a very damageable things which is happening all over the world because of the climate change. Next. Next slide. The the whole climate change has a major impacts on indigenous, I mean the tribal communities and the grassroots level communities, because indigenous communities always geographically tend to be located in regions more vulnerable and to the climate change. They are really suffering a lot because of the drought, because of the flood, because of any other natural calamities. The people are really facing a lot of trouble. Those who are in a tribal communities or at the grassroots or the nearby ocean communities. These communities are the first to face climate consequences. Farmers counting on the traditional forecasting are feeling defenseless in front of the changing nature's cycle. Changing climates that after the environment will have a greater effect on people who depend on the environment directly. So the situation is not very good when we think about all these communities. When we are sitting at a very nice city or in a very nice house with all the amenities, we could not think what the way is going beyond these communities. We have, I have happened to visit to Bangladesh and Egypt in few months back, and I saw the life of the Bangladesh people, those who are nearby the ocean. They are really fighting with the climate change and with the natural calamities in a very high kind of percentage. Next. So what the climate action for these communities is, indigenous communities has started the community initiative by teaching traditional skills in community classes, which is very important. Indigenous communities and groups are working with governmental programs to adapt to the impacts climate change is having on their community. We are making a capacity building of those communities through my organization. Even in Bangladesh, villagers are creating floating vegetable gardens to protect their livelihood from flooding. They are expanding the aquaculture. They are going to the roof vegetable farming and so on. In Vietnam also, the communities are helping plant dense mangroves along the coast to diffuse tropical storm waves. So these communities are taking the efforts, and many NGOs, many even the government agencies are helping them to come out of this climate change hazards. The next slide. The interventions to enhance community climate resilience is use of advanced low energy desalination system, rainwater traps, advanced sustainable aquaculture systems can provide sustainable irrigation and soil reforming for sustainable solar systems, biodegradable plastic manufacturing, plasma gasification of agricultural and municipal waste for electricity generation, and advanced electrical vehicles and geoengineering technologies. These are some measures they are taking, and it needs to enhance all those things. But when we are talking about all these things, and when we think about that we are having only one earth, and we are the family who are residing on that earth, and she's our mother. So as the slogan is Vasudha Kutumbakam, I always think about our Vedas, and in our ancient Vedas, they have mentioned 3 rinas. So those 3 rinas are Deva Rina, Matru Pitru Rina, and Rishi Rina. The fourth rina is Manav Rina. These rinas are nothing but our duties towards the God, parents, gurus, and society, and nature respectively. So if these duties are performed properly, the moral order would be protected, and as a result, the cosmic order would be maintained, and the peace can be prevailed in the society. So therefore, we must not get savaged away in the storm of materialism and consumerism, but must live the life of contentment within the limits of nature. So nature is protecting us, but we need to protect nature. That is our have to be the motto. And when we think about the problem of global warming, it is our primary duty towards our Mother Earth. Thus, we always say that we can build a Taj Mahal, if destroyed, even probably better than the original one, with the new advanced science and technology. But we cannot revive species of lost. They would be lost forever. This is not a myth, but an ecological truth. And that's why all the Vedas are always tell people that you be with the nature, preserve the nature, nurture the nature, and all these problem will vanish. Thank you. Thanks for listening. This is all from my end.
Thank you very much. I'll stop the share, and please, I leave the audience for questions. So please go ahead in typing in the chat if you have any question related to the very interesting talk provided by Dr. Apte. Yes, we have two questions. So the first one is, oh wow, we have more than two. I will pick two between them. What extent of sociological and physiological effort need for all the humans at the level of decision maker and followers to actually be helpful to achieve the climate resilience? Dr. Apte?
I was just, can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So these questions I could see, very interesting questions they are asking. The sociological and physiological effort needs for all the humans at the level of decision makers and followers to actually be helpful to achieve the climate resilience. This is true, but I always say that when we are giving the responsibility to the governments or any other thing, which is I never believe that someone else can do anything for the natural disaster or any climate resilience thing, or no one can protect the natural disaster. But more or less, these natural disasters are nowadays, it's a man-made disasters. And when you have some unity and you don't think that some other will come and survive you, save you, which will not happen at all. We have to work on our own. We have to fight for that. All humans needs to be together to fight the climate change.
Thank you very much, Dr. Apte. I would move now to the next speaker. Thank you again, and you eventually can consider to answer to the other question by typing in the question answer. So we are now moving to the speaker number 3, Dr. Sudesh Kumar Wadhawan, which is adjunct professor at Amrita, Vishwa, Vidyapeetham, and former Director General of the Geological Survey of India. Dr. Sudesh Kumar Wadhawan is a gold medalist, MSc Applied Geology Scholar from Weir Hall, University of Delhi. Besides writing for over 40 technical reports in GSI, he published over 60 scientific journal papers in peer-reviewed national and international journals, and co-authored 4 books and contributed to chapters to thematic books by Springer Nature, Francis and Taylor publishers. Presently, Dr. Sudesh Wadhawan is an adjunct professor at the Amrita Center for Wireless Network and Application and nominated geoscience advisor and expert member of the other government departments and commission. The title of the talk that Dr. Wadhawan will give today is Understanding Multi-Hazard and Enhancing Capacity for Disaster Resilience. Thank you again, Dr. Wadhawan and Professor Wadhawan, and here the stage is yours. And probably you should unmute. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor, for giving such elaborate introduction. Can I have my PowerPoint uploaded, please, from your end?
Sure, we will do that.
Can you please share the screen and upload my PowerPoint presentation? Okay, so the topic on which I shall be talking today is on understanding multi-hazards and enhancing capacity for disaster resilience. Let's see what are the multi-hazards that human society is facing. Essentially, there are three natural multi-hazards, and of course, fourth one is the anthropogenic. One is the water-related, that is which is leading to the landslides, floods, and once the river gets blocked because of the landslides, then there is outburst flooding and GLOF, glacial lake outburst flooding, avalanches, hurricanes, and cyclones. Other is deep earth related multi-hazards, which are again caused by the geodynamics, by the Earth's internal processes, that is earthquakes, which lead to also the tsunamis and volcanoes, etc. And then third one is, of course, more related also to the human interventions, that is responding to global environmental changes, which lead to sea level rise, coastal erosion, saline water intrusion, impacts on oceanic biodiversity, and of course, rise in temperature, as has been explained very nicely by the first speaker, how the urban heat islands are generated because of the jungle of concrete which has come up in the urban areas. And of course, the rainfall patterns are also changing, and we see the extreme weather events, droughts, and dust storms and other activities because of the atmospheric circulation patterns. And of course, vulnerability to nuclear, biological, and chemical disasters and terrorism has also increased of late. Next slide, please. Now, these multi-hazards, they cause huge loss in terms of property and life. There is an estimate that average annual loss from these multi-hazards in India, they have been to the tune of nearly $10 billion per year. That is nearly 70,000 crores. And of course, we in India have huge Himalayan terrain, which is actually vulnerable to earthquakes, nearly 58.6% of the land, and nearly 13% of the land is prone to landslides in India, and 8.5% is vulnerable to cyclones, particularly on the east coast, and 5% is vulnerable to the floods. These floods are again also related to the landslides. That's how, there is a cascading effect. Once there are landslides and extreme heavy rainfall events, which can also lead to the flooding of the stream and drainage basins. And of course, there are a few other kinds of hazards, but I will be developing more on the natural hazards and multi-hazards. Next, please. Next slide. Now, in India, and of course, that also is the case with many other countries, there is a lot of ongoing research and generation of scientific data bank, and a lot of repositories are created for the scientific data, particularly pertaining to the causative and triggering aspects of various multi-hazards. We as earth scientists are trying to analyze why certain phenomena are happening, and what are the triggering mechanisms, and how the processes will affect the human settlements, particularly in such vulnerable areas. And there are, of course, we have national and state level disaster management authorities which are actually actively engaged in compiling all this data. The Geological Survey of India is, of course, the nodal agency for studies on landslides, and Central Water Commission is the central agency for studies on the floods. Of course, I'll be again developing more on this, that we need to have a lot of synergies amongst these different departments who are engaged in collecting and generating data, scientific data, and how this data should be freely available to various user agencies and stakeholders for working out very effective mechanisms for dealing with these multi. And then, of course, we have the Indian Meteorology Department and the National Bureau of Soil Survey, and then Department of Space, Indian Space Research Organization is actually doing a lot of satellite-based imagery interpretations on various types of the hazards and the land use, land cover aspects, which are also having their own impacts on the climate change. And best part is several leading in, like Amrita, Vishwa, Vidyapeetham, our own university is involved in doing a lot of research work on various multi-hazards, particularly landslides and the related multi-hazards, cascading effects of landslides into the floods and other man-made hazards accordingly. Various IITs and research organizations are also engaged in this. And National Institute of Disaster Management, and of course, National Disaster Response Force and various NGOs and CSOs are actually involved in actually preparing the community to face and to mitigate the impacts of these disasters. Next, please. Now, we know, of course, the geological details are already there with us, and we know the geological map of India and the tectonic map of India on various scales, particularly 1:50,000 scale. The data is freely available to the public. And based on the occurrences of the various earthquakes, we have already developed the seismic zonation map. Particularly, you can see the Himalayan belt is actually very highly vulnerable, zone 4 and 5 in this. And this part of the Gujarat, Kutch area is again very vulnerable to earthquakes. Now, the earthquake-induced landslides are very common, particularly in northeastern region of India, wherein there is heavy rainfall in general, and then extreme weather events are also happening. Next, please. And we know that a lot of systematic landslide studies are being conducted by geological survey. One phase is already over. That is to depict the most vulnerable, most susceptible landslide prone areas on 1:50,000 scale. And the next phase is again taking over since the current field season. That is on the mesoscale work on the landslides. These are the areas, the Himalayan terrain, including, of course, Nepal is there. Nepal is also doing its own very good work for identifying the vulnerable and susceptible areas for landslides and earthquake-prone areas. And then Western Ghats, all over the West. These are the areas which are very badly affected year after year by the extreme weather and also the landslides. And we know that the best part is the National Disaster Management Authority, which developed an act in 2005. It had highlighted that preparedness and mitigation are definitely preferred options rather than incurring more expenditure and making ad hoc arrangements for rescue, relief, and rehabilitation. So this is the principle that we are actually even now focusing on, that we must understand. Please go for the next slide. We must understand the the issues involved, and then also prepare for the preventions. And I'll give you two examples wherein these multiple hazards have occurred and what lessons we would learn. One is the Kedarnath tragedy in Uttarakhand in India. That is in 17th June 2013. There was Glof Glacier Lake outburst flooding, and extreme heavy rains were there. The streams were already charged with a lot of flow discharge. But then there was one lake at Chorabari, place Chorabari, which got breached because of the excessive rain and inflow of a lot of water. And because of that breach, huge amount of water was released down the Mandakini River, and a lot of devastation happened. Again, extreme flooding event, and it resulted in a lot of erosion. Next, please. Let us quickly go over this. These are the various scenes wherein toe erosion and bank erosion is happening. A lot of women settlements were also affected. Next, please. Next, the important lessons here are that large-scale mass wasting took place in higher reaches, and loose, large-sized, unconsolidated material was actually brought down, and it was forced down the streams because of the heavy rains and the availability of the gushing water. And this debris-laden water, it could rise up to 10 meters from the normal flow level, and the rapid flow of viscous fluid, which again carried a lot of these huge boulders. It had that erosive power to cut through the various banks and different bars that are normally built along the channel path. So channel erosion and cutting of the toes, various terraces normally which are occupied by the women settlements, which consider it to be the safer planar grounds in the hilly terrain. So they were all mostly eroded and very badly damaged. And then a lot of headward erosion was also seen because of this extreme event. And another important aspect was that long runouts of various landslides, particularly on the tributary streams, first and second order streams. They brought in a lot of material, a lot of slow forming material down to the main channel, and it temporarily blocked. And then once that blockage was removed with the vigorous force of the discharge, then it led to further devastating floods downstream. So these were the things which, again, I'll give you another example in Kerala. Next, please. And then I'll give you the kind of outcomes that we have. So in Kerala also, where in 2018 there were floods, extreme heavy rainfalls, and then in Wayanad and Malappuram, that is this number 4, these areas, there were landslides and a lot of floods. Next, please. I'll just show you how the floods, the landslides happened here at this particular area, Kavalapara. But then next place, I'll just show you how Chelliar River. Now this is part of the Chelliar River basin. Now this landslide is happening here, and similarly in Wayanad, the landslides happened in this particular sub-basin. So these contributed their material to along with the water to this main channel, and this main channel again was getting flooded, and it was again charged with the landslide and runout material from this particular sub-basin. So we have seen again similarly in Kedarnath area, wherein Mandakini was also flooded, and large runouts were there. So all these runouts, they blocked the channel, and then they created an environment wherein the floods could intensify further by cutting through these blocked areas. So the lesson that we have learned is that we should consider the entire water basin, entire drainage basin, if we are to evolve some model or work out on the discharge characteristics of a particular area. Because the people here, they had come to know that there is going to be a landslide, but they could not cross this river, which was already flooded. So they were trapped, unfortunately, and they lost their lives and all that. Next, please. So after studying various geofactors, the slope morphometry, geomorphology, geology, and different types of structures and tectonics, and different land use, land cover aspects, and then geohydrology, particularly groundwater regime, and soil moistures and geotechnical attributes. We have developed, next please, I'll show you how the landslide susceptibility map has been developed by Geological Survey of India. And this map on 1:50,000 scale is available for all the 15 vulnerable states. And each state also is showing in a very nice user-friendly manner. Next, please, the areas which are actually susceptible to landslide hazard, and of course flooding hazard is also combined with many of these landslide prone areas. Next, please. So now I will just highlight some of the basics on enhancing capacity. Now we emphasis is on, we must understand the nature of the multi hazards, the causes, the geological scientific causes, and then what is it that we can do to enhance the capacity to have to face this disaster event. That is the disaster resilience. We cannot prevent all types of disasters that are endemic to our geology, geography, climate, social and cultural settings, but we can certainly strive to reduce risks and manage crises more efficiently so that hazards do not degenerate into disasters. Now that is important. And let us see disaster resilience is innate or acquired ability of individuals, communities, organizations, and states to adapt to and recover from hazards, shocks, and stresses without compromising long-term prospects for development. So the best thing that as humans living in vulnerable tracts is to develop our disaster resilience. That is to develop our capacity. Next, please, I'll show you how, if we are acquiring such knowledge through citizen science approach, we are improving our capacity, our skills, and our resources to meet these challenges, and then disaster risk reduction and risk management. They are all important components for enhancing community resilience. And the two major aspects which are now being followed in most of the countries, particularly the advanced countries in the north, that is the citizen science with the increased use of internet, and that is being utilized globally and extracting, validating essential information for landslide modeling and other multi-hazards and early warnings. And then dynamic risk map. This is another novel approach wherein the various parameters, including geofactors, are actually depicted, and their dynamic nature is actually worked out, and the warnings are issued accordingly. Next, please. So important component which I think is to be emphasized here is the compassionate disaster management. Disasters are typically marked by chaos and confusion, and sheer volume of suffering can easily overwhelm our capacity to respond. Therefore, stability of mind and critical thinking are essential skills for effective, compassionate actions in these settings. And compassion is certainly more than a desire to help. It is a cognitive awareness, and it is really essential. It is not that one has to do it. It is not a luxury. It is a necessity for our well-being and resilience and survival. Now, this is what we really need to develop and propagate. Next, please. Now, citizen science is actually a participatory, community-based, bottoms-up approach, and this leads to various implementation of some of the preparatory stage activities, and also pre-disaster as well as during disaster and post-disaster various activities, which are actually now they are developed as standard operating procedures and mock drills. So I'll just conclude by making few of the concluding remarks. Next, please. Next. Now, these are the various roles which are actually supposed to be done by the citizen science groups. Next, please. I may not have time to go into these details, but then these are well-established principles and activities to operationalize the various citizen science approaches. Next, please. And a very important app that Amrita University, along with the international collaborators, that is British Geological Survey, King's College of London, and Geological Survey of India, and other research institutes, they developed an app for international research, which was done on this landslip. Now, this is actually it's an application wherein through mobile phones, various type of data is generated. Next, please. And dynamic risk maps, again, these are the various geological factors, topographical factors. These are the more or less static factors, but then these meteorological factors and anthropogenic factors, these are the dynamic factors. And interaction of all these four is actually leading us to develop a model for actually mitigation of these things. Now, I'll just, next please, the concluding remarks. Next please, go to the conclusion part. Yeah, for lessening the impacts of extreme climate events, it's really imperative to recognize gaps between geoscientific research and practice. The implementation is a real challenge. Even if we know what is really happening, how do we translate it onto ground? How do we involve the community? That is a big challenge. And of course, best way is having nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based adaptations, wherever it is feasible. Then there is need to coordinate research efforts by academic research organizations and practicing professionals, CSOs, for adopting and implementing evolving and modern technologies for mitigation and building sustainable infrastructure, and develop a culture of prevention, again through citizen science and dynamic risk map. These are the two examples which from Amrita University we are propagating. Next, please. And people should be involved in risk management right from the beginning of the risk management by regular conductance of workshops, trainings, and educating the community and outreach programs. And another important aspect, which I think is really a governance part, that is we must have cooperative but very firm civic administration, to get certain things implemented in due course of time. So a collective and collaborative team effort is really imperative. We of course have the CSOs working in this, but then we have to collaborate with the local government, because various authorities and various resources which are available with them, that has to be really taken care. Next, please. This is the final one. I think then there are uncertainties and limitations should be clearly communicated to the authorities and communities, because we still do not know everything about nature, and we are still in the process of learning and upgrading our knowledge. So we must explain our limitations and accordingly build up our strategies to face these different multi-hazards. And then of course we have now modern technologies. Civil engineers must be encouraged to be working with and adopting alternatives to conventional concrete, and use of recycled aggregates and low carbon cement replacements, and promote scientific and engineering development of geotextiles, geomembranes, and other related products. So these are the technological innovations and modern developments which really need to be implemented on ground for a very comprehensive assessment and mitigation of the multi-hazards. Thank you very much. Next, please. Yeah, thank you. So collaboration and cooperation are the buzzwords. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Professor Wadhawan, for your very interesting and detailed presentation. We have just time for one question. You have got several. So I just read one, and is how much can the reservoirs created out of hydropower dams along the river system sustain the water and the slope material load generated through growth and subsequent erosional process along the river? So they mainly want to connect the impact of those reservoirs to the erosion and so on.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very interesting question. You know, there has been a huge debate whether we should have large dams or small dams. You know, large dams means larger catchment submergence, particularly in the hilly areas. We should not be, I personally feel, we should not be allowing for very large dams. We should be allowing for smaller dams and small check dams, and you know, these watershed management aspects and all that. They are much more beneficial for the community, not only for you know, preventing the deserts, but also for you know, recharging for groundwater and availability of the water around the year. There are ways wherein we have to compromise, you know, this balancing act between the availability of the resources, because you know, the solutions have to be cost effective. So that is the main issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have now arrived to the fourth speaker, Dr. Rini Dutt, Senior Manager, Programs, Climate and Energy. Dr. Rini has over 10 years of work experience in the areas of climate change research, GHG inventorization, subnational climate planning and water security for rural communities. At the Vasudha Foundation, she is leading the climate team. Previously, Rini has worked in India National Communication and to the UNFCCC in the project management cell of the MOEFCC, as well as the Indian Institute of Management. Dr. Rini has published work and popular articles to her credits. The title of the presentation that Dr. Rini will give us today is Understanding the Significance of Community Engagement and Identifying the Synergies of Climate Action and Resilience Building. So please welcome Dr. Rini, and please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, moderator, Dr. Formetta. And just clarification, I'm not a doctor. I have not done my PhD, so I'm just Rini or Miss Rini. That's so thank you. And we have had excellent, presentations from the co-panelists. So I'll just quickly talk about what I wanted to share and, share my experience. Dr. Formetta, would you be sharing the presentation, or should I share?
If you can go ahead.
Sure. Okay, so I hope the screen is visible.
Very good. Yes.
Okay. So as the moderator has already mentioned, what I bring to the table today is sharing my experience about how important it is to have community engagement. And because my forte of the 10 years of work experience that I have in the field of climate has been more towards climate mitigation, or what we call in broader terms as climate action, I want to talk about the synergies about mitigation and resilience building, because these two things cannot be dealt in silos, and especially because today's policy dialogue that we have all joined for is focusing on climate resilience. So I wanted to talk about the synergies. Moving forward, So the first thing I want to talk about the years when I was working with the rural communities in Gujarat, and we used to go out and interact with them, and as a representative of the water supply department of government of Gujarat, to ensure water security in these villages. What kind of tactics we employed in order to have everybody on board, in order to ensure that the scheme or the project that the government is putting money is sustained, it brings prosperity and well-being of the for the community. So the basic things most of us over here are already aware, and some of the panelists have already talked about, is how important it is to understand the perspectives, needs, or what we call as the requirement and challenges, as well as the priorities and aspirations of the various communities or the groups within a particular community. You need to understand what the women folk have to say. You need to understand what the head of the village or the panchayat has to say, and you need to come up with a plan that kind of addresses all these issues, has multiple objectives, has multiple outcomes, and is sustainable in nature, and is reliable, sustainable, is eco-friendly. So you need to take all the perspectives on board before you implement in fact, forget implementing, before you even plan, before you even put it on your drawing board. The second most important thing when you're dealing with the community, and when you're trying to make them understand, or even trying to give them something which is beneficial to them, is to inculcate the spirit of ownership in the community. Because there are so many instances when the government is trying to provide, or an organization or a CSR is trying to provide something, say tap water connectivity, say toilets, but just because the community was not involved in the planning and in the project planning and project implementation phase, all these amenities are often kind of overlooked and are not maintained well. So one very nice solution that the government came up when we were working, and in fact is something which is followed across the board, is the entire thing is funded by the government, but a percentage, a very minuscule percentage of the capital cost of that scheme. Suppose if you're trying to give them tap water connectivity, and it suppose costs you around 1 crore rupees, or say, just because we have international participants also, suppose it costs you around $10,000. I'm just throwing a random number. So 1% of that capex should come from the community, because once they have this sense of ownership, once they have this idea that, okay, my money is also invested, then it becomes their property. I mean, it is still a public property, it is still a public amenity, but as we all know, public public infrastructure is infrastructure for everybody, but responsibility for nobody. But the moment a person realizes that even my money, or my it doesn't have to be money, it can be anything. For example, when we were doing rainwater harvesting structures for them, we didn't ask for money. They were contributing in form of labor. They would dig the well, or will help us install the rainwater harvesting system. So once they get involved, they get the sense of ownership, and all these instances where the taps are broken and are not taken care of, is everything. So all of that is taken care of. Second is about capacity building. Of course, you need capacity building, all the aspects, but when we talk about some intervention, especially in the sense for climate resilience, there would be some kind of intervention. If I talk about what Amrita University is already doing, I recently attended their workshop in Sikkim, and in Sikkim, with the Sikkim government, they have installed some early warning systems for the landslides. So if a technological intervention has been, there has been investment in that, we want to make sure that there's adequate operation and maintenance of that intervention. There's somebody, not just somebody, but overall the entire community is taking care of that. So you need to build the capacity of the community to be able to do the proper O&M, to be able to share what are the challenges once the project is implemented, and if you want to upgrade that, what kind of upgradation they want, they should be able to share that. Once we have this at different levels, what we find at the end of it is that we are addressing climate change, because we are talking about climate change here, with empowered communities. So this should be the ultimate goal, and community involvement should be a part of it. The second part that I want to highlight, and something that we are working here at Vasudha Foundation, is doing subnational work. And we all know there are absolutely no universal solutions for anything, neither for climate mitigation. I mean, of course, the goal is common, but what is applicable or what can be a solution in a village in India may not be applicable to a town from where our moderator and Dr. Lorenzo is. I mean, the solutions can greatly vary, and within a country like India, which has so much of diversity of climate and agroclimatic zones, we need very specific, sector-specific and issue-specific solutions, and that's what we also like to promote through adopting a bottom-up approach, where you have these smaller plans, either at district level or at city level. We are even doing it for Gram Panchayats, which then feeds into the state action plans, the state goals, and which ultimately feed into the national plans and goals. Again, when you have smaller plans, when you are dealing with a smaller region, the community engagement is far more enhanced than when you're preparing a national action plan, or you're preparing an action plan for a big region covering 2-3 states. So having specific tailor-made solutions is very important. And when you prepare these plans, you need a lot of baseline data to do a lot of baseline assessments, including your GHG profile, your vulnerability profile, your risk analysis. So when you do these plans, that's when you come across what are the gaps, where do we need more data, where do we want the departments or the different academic institutes to come together and be able to collate data at the most granular level. So these things help us to identify what is missing and where do we need to fill those gaps. Similarly, when we talk about the finance, there is a lot of financial facility available in the form of various schemes, which can be slightly tweaked and can be seen through the lens of climate action. For example, if we talk about the breed improvement program, the livestock breed improvement program, which will not only help to reduce your emissions, but would also help to increase the adaptive capacity. Similarly, your seed banks program, your infrastructure development programs and schemes, you can invest, you can tie up that with your climate goals and bring funds for the action plans that you're developing for a smaller region. And most importantly, any developing country, because we have participants from India and so many other countries in this session and otherwise for G20, needs to meet its development goals, needs to provide needs to get rid of poverty, needs to provide energy access, and so much it has to do for its people. So when you start preparing these plans at smaller levels, you start factoring climate change in all the development planning. So that's why a bottom-up approach is crucial for climate action and climate adaptation. Talking about the synergies, the problem with the climate planning so far or historically has been climate action and mitigation has always been dealt separately than climate adaptation. And often these are the policy and the research around them is also pretty different. The kind of funds they get is different because they have always been dealt in silos, but that shouldn't be the case. Of course, when you try to combine the two things, there are trade-offs, but then there is also a good possibility to have a win-win situation, which can be cheaper and effective. And for developing countries, this is an opportunity to leapfrog. When you're trying to achieve your development goals, you also achieve it in a sustainable manner, especially for your rural, semi-rural, or even for that matter, urban areas. If I talk about from the perspective of India, we have this large, need for space cooling. Now, if you can meet that requirement through RE, renewable energy, you are not only helping the adaptation goal, but you're also taking care of your mitigation. Similarly, we need connectivity. We need connectivity to all our far-flung places, rural areas. And if you can meet that through e-mobility, electric mobility, which is coming a great way in India, we have amazing policies and schemes. And even in cities, like you have, even in urban areas where you have all the facilities, but, the last mile connectivity is missing, or there's a lot of traffic congestion. So if you can, give more resources to public transport, which is run on low carbon technologies, or you can give more importance to, non-motorized transport, you are not only taking care of what Dr. Lorenzo, our first speaker, talked about. You're not only taking care of your urban heat island effect, you're not only reducing your emissions because you are not using fossil fuels, or you're reducing the use of fossil fuels, but you're also ensuring that your the citizens have proper connectivity, have proper accessibility for transportation. Similarly, clean cooking is another example where a lot of cooking practices in the rural areas still use fuel wood, and it's harmful both in terms of climate and also for health, especially the indoor pollution and all. So if you can talk about electrification there, where you can directly jump from fuel wood to electric stove and not go through LPG, you are doing the leapfrog. So that was one case to strengthen why we should strengthen the synergies between adaptation and mitigation. The other point is, when you tell people that we'll take care of your adaptation needs, their support for climate mitigation increases manifold. So when you deal these two things through a multi-pronged approach through one project, you kind of reinforce the public support for that. Again, being able to identify the links and co-benefits and tapping the potential is crucial to be able to, propose projects or propose solutions or interventions that are address both mitigation and adaptation. Another quick example is that of mangroves that fall in the agriculture, forestry, and other land use sector for the coastal zones. So if you are managing your mangroves, you're not only enhancing your carbon sinks, but you're also protecting your coastal cities or those regions from coastal hazards. And my last slide talks about, I think one of the points or one of the questions that was given to us was, how do we ensure that the ground voices, the voices from the ground, are incorporated in these solutions? I mean, there have been a lot of solutions, and the speakers before me have already talked about it. But there are a few things, again, I'd just like to kind of highlight. One is we need to kickstart the discussion across the board, across the levels, and we need to involve all the stakeholders, not for the sake of it that if we go to a village or a gram panchayat, we just include 10 people and we talk about. We need to include all the community members, people of different vulnerable groups, women, and school, like youths and children, and understand their perspective. So that's about community, but even other stakeholders. What about the cottage industries? What about the farmer groups? What about the small businesses that are running in and around the village? We need to involve them. And the most important thing is to have government on board. The buy-in from government really helps to take your message forward. We need to find the common ground between the goal or the project that you have envisaged, and what are the priorities and aspirations of the community. If you can find that, I can guarantee you that people will accept your project, will accept your proposal, and will be happy to contribute for that project. There is a whole, I mean, we need a whole big session about community mobilization and what can be done for information, education, and communication, IEC. But just one thing I feel is to be able to identify your key change agents, your ambassadors in the community. If you can identify them and you can build their strength and their capacity, they will do half of your work to take the message ahead. Similarly, reward and recognition. If there's some green initiative happening in the region or the area you want to further work on, or you want to implement a technology, we should be able to recognize that, be able to reward those, and encourage people to move in that direction. Again, what I mentioned above, all the green initiatives that we are trying to do at different levels should be tied up with some financing streams, should be tied up with other activities, other organization. If you have people, if you have your climate ambassador or your water ambassador, they should be connected to different networks. They should be given an opportunity for learning and exposure and going out and meeting new people, new organization. So that's also important. And one last thing which I strongly believe in is just not putting a project or a proposal on a paper, but ensuring and tracking the implementation of that objective, of the objectives that we had envisaged, as well as ensuring that the outcomes that we had proposed are met, or we do reach those outcomes. So that's from my side. If there are questions, I'll be happy to answer, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Rini. And yes, please. If the audience has some questions, use the question and answer block. Or if there is someone ready, then we can pause to. Okay, I don't see specific question, but now is the time of the open house questions. And so here is the time where we need your help. Why? Because the audience is going to help the discussion in answering to the specific question that we are going to pose you. You can answer eventually raising your hands, or even better, using the Google form format that we are going to share in the chat of the meeting. The questions are for sure opened for the speakers, for all the 4 speakers, which has eventually the priority to answer, but the audience is really, really encouraged to provide the feedbacks to those questions. So the first question, I'm going to read it to you, is what are the ways in which community climate resilience can be enhanced using modeling and technological intervention? As you can see, this is a very general question. Eventually, every one of us has his own way to look at it. So please, I will start with some of the speakers, one of the speakers, and I also encourage the audience to answer to this first question.
Okay, I'll attempt this. I have already elaborated, and other panelists have also mentioned, particularly Rini, that community resilience is really important. The capacity building and training, and then mock drills. Actual implementation on ground. Combination of the community as well as the civic administration combined is really the answer. That is what many of us have seen in Sikkim. The local community plus the civic administration, they were all working together hand in hand. And we were sharing our expert knowledge with them and preparing them to face any eventuality, both pre-disaster, during disaster, as well as post-disaster. there are a number of standard operating procedures on that. So that is my take on this.
Thank you, Professor Wadhawan. So just to underline again the importance of the last mile that we have to work for really implementing on the ground the measure for risk reduction and increasing the resilience of each community. Yes, if someone else wants to, please go ahead. Yeah, Dr. Apte. We still cannot hear you, but probably not yet. Now, yes.
So actually, we have seen this disaster kind of thing in Sikkim. It was a really impressive workshop over there, and I believe their participation, unless they know the benefit,
We probably have some problem with the audio.
What
I don't think
all the universities who are connected with them are doing a wonderful job for implementing and getting the communities on board.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Apte.
If I can add something.
Please,
actually, as at least in my experience, as I also showed in my presentation, now the scientific community has developed many very useful, for example, modeling tools to evaluate what can be the effects of different technologies or different strategies, for example, in mitigating or improving the thermal comfort in urban areas, in improving the environmental conditions in urban areas. What is probably missing, as was also mentioned before, is the link between this scientific advancement and the real implementation of this kind of possible solution or possible strategies. And so what is missing is the connection in some cases between the scientific world and the decision makers, let's say. So who is actually in charge of implementing this kind of solution? In my experience, there is no, in many cases, a good communication between the scientific world and policy and decision makers. So probably this is what is now missing to try to really implement these strategies, for example, in urban areas, but also in other contexts.
Thank you very much, Professor Giovannini. And this is somehow the introduction for the next question, eventually, which is in fact related to what are the major inhibitors and propellers of adopting such as intervention by communities. Yes, Professor Giovannini was kind of introducing some of the problems, for example, the mismatch between the university side and the decision makers that have to put on the ground those actions. But yes, someone of you has some other indication about this question of individuating in particular the inhibitors and the propellers of adopting interventions by residence communities. Yes.
Again, I fully agree with the professor there that there's a mismatch, but then there is resource crunch also. The financial resources are also very limited for certain activities. So that is another hindrance for proper implementation. And another point added to this is the the data sharing. In fact, the knowledge sharing, even the technological advancements which are happening even within the country or between the north countries and the south countries of the globe, that exchange of technology is actually not happening the way it should happen, because the humanity is just one. We are all Vasudha Kutumbakam. We are all human. Society is just one the world over. So if technology has been developed in one part of the world, and it has got some good benefits for the society and for controlling the climate changes, then I think we should be quite open in sharing that kind of technology. And of course, work out on providing the resources, the financial resources to put it on ground. That will go a long way. That is just a suggestion. But then I think it's a very practical approach wherein countries like India and other South emerging economies are actually facing. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and I would also add the importance of combining open technologies with, for example, open models and eventually open data, because somehow data are very, very precious, especially for those hazards like landslide, which are very specific, very small scale occurring. Therefore, the knowledge of the data is a treasure, let's say, which should be eventually also shared together with models and technologies, of course.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is there any other comment about this question? Okay, so in that case, I would like to still encourage the audience to answer to the Google form because it's really, really important and yes, crucial having your impressions, your ideas. And in the meantime, I would move to the third question, which is somehow looking to another side, and in particular on how can we actively include the voice of the people while designing such interventions, for example. So the importance of including people that lives in that context, in that areas, directly in the designing of the intervention that we are going to plan. Which of course will be a strong plus in the putting the intervention on the ground, because this will be very, very important. Will make the difference, as for example, Rini, the last speaker was mentioning. So please, if you have an impression on it or comments.
Yes, I can comment on this. Again, in the context of the urban environment, this is very, very important, the involvement of the population. And I have experience of several projects in which the population was involved in several ways. For example, one simple way can be in the monitoring of urban climate, but not only. There are several projects in which, for example, urban pollution is monitored by means of networks of sensors which are managed also by normal citizens. Of course, there is a need for at least a minimum technical, let's say, training of the population for using this kind of sensor. But then the involvement of the population can be a very important factor also for the development of this kind of measurements, because these can help the spreading of the measurements, so to have a more complete view of the, for example, temperature, if it is a meteorological network, or also the spatial distribution of some pollutants. Particularly for pollutants, this is very important because usually the official networks actually official measurements are very, very expensive, and there are just some few points inside cities in which pollutants are measured, while it is important also for evaluating the exposure of the population to have a very dense network of this kind of sensors. And this can be achieved, for example, with a network of low-cost sensors, which can be managed by the population by means of some citizen science projects. This is for the monitoring. Then, as you, Professor Formetta, were mentioning, it is important also to involve the population in the, for example, in the decision of the possible strategies for the adaptation of the urban area. So, for example, we have proposed here in Italy a new project about urban climatology, in which an important part will be the involvement in the population in designing the strategies for improving the livability in urban areas. So inside this project, there will be several meetings with the population in order to discuss about the possible strategies. And so with, let's say, a bottom-up approach, a bottom-top approach for the development of such strategies. So yes, I think that this is a very, very important point, the involvement of the population in this kind of projects, also for the success of these projects.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I add to that?
Yes,
Professor
sure.
Formetta?
Please,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I think, well, most of my presentation was on this part, but I would just like to reiterate that, just going out and speaking. So if you have a project area, that's perfect if you go out and speak with the stakeholders that are concerned to that area. But, because we are from this field and we have representatives from think tanks, and then we have you and Dr. Lorenzo from the academia, and of course, Dr. Wadhawan. So just going out and taking the perspective of somebody else, speaking with a government officer, even if that person is not from that region where you want to implement the project, speaking with an academician who brings in some other aspect, just speaking out and trying to understand the perspective itself will just, kind of set the dialogue as we are doing it right now. But, speaking with other people who are not working in the field is super important. And as I had mentioned earlier, there are so many projects, so many schemes that reach the public. How do you make sure that people are interested for your project? Right? So a village in India, from the Indian perspective, receives probably 100 schemes. So how do you make sure that the plan that you are taking ahead is well received? Is when you show commitment. That was my last point, is when you show commitment that this was our objective one, this was to be achieved in this timeline, it has been achieved. When you start doing it, when you start achieving your outcomes in your stipulated time frame, or even if you exceed it a little bit, that's when people start believing you. And that's when they start getting engaged. They engage with you and get engaged in your project. So I think showing commitment through your actions and talking about the entire thing is super important. Just end there.
Thank you very much, Rini. And so we can move towards our fourth and last question. So here we ask what key issue related to climate resilience should we focus on in the policy briefing submitted to the G20. So this is a little bit more policy related, and so we would the question here are the key issue related to climate resilience that we should focus on in the policy briefing that is going to be submitted to the G20. So if you have any suggestion, or please go ahead, please Dr. Apte, go ahead.
This is that the many policies are always keep it on the on only the papers. So the policies which we submit to the government or the authorities should be implementation friendly. And it should be to the those organizations who are even working on the grassroots level. They can also adopt those policies. They should not be scared to look at those policies and to get implemented. So this should be a very friendly policies need to be drafted. And basically for the implementation ground, it should be very friendly. Most of the policies are, as we see and as we look at it, even from the United Nations climate change policies or any other policies which are coming in front of our table, are always very, drafted in a very critical language, which cannot be digestible. So the knowledge which we are going through the giving through policies should be people should be jumped on it. That this policy, as it is on the implementation level, the policies will be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Very clear point of view. Very important as well. Is there
can I just mention a couple of points here? I think it's very important to have a very good synergy and collaboration, say within the country, the civic administration and the CSOs, because everything cannot be done by government alone. So we need to involve civic society organizations, NGOs, and community at large. And there has to be a good synergy and good interaction. Number two, for technological data sharing and exchange, we need to have good collaboration and good exchange between various academic centers, research organizations, both maybe within the country, which is happening because Amrita University is entering into a lot of memorandum of understanding with several state governments to collaborate and work together. Because we have recognized that government involvement is a must for any of such climate change, community resilience issues. But at the same time, I would also request that we should have a lot of good international collaboration also, maybe with the universities or with the leading organizations, so that the exchange of data is facilitated and then it's likely to be implemented in the proper spirit. So the collaboration and coordination and of course cooperation is really the key issue which should be taken care. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Wadhawan.
Just adding one more point to Dr. Wadhawan's list is, scaling up finance. We really need finance and especially for adaptation. We all know climate finance is mostly and always has been focused on the mitigation part, but we need finance for resilience building. So international finance and technology cooperation is super important.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rini. So we are arriving to the end of the webinar. I would like to thank again all the speakers, Dr. Rini Dutt, Dr. Sudesh Wadhawan, Dr. Vinitaa Apte, and Professor Lorenzo, Dr. Lorenzo Giovannini, and all the organizers behind the scene that made possible the nice presentation and support, technological support in doing that. So once again, thank you all the audience, and I look forward to meet you somehow, somewhere again.
Sure. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for moderating. Thank you, Amrita University.
Thank you, everybody. That was indeed a very fruitful and inspiring discussion and a great way to culminate today's program. I would just like to introduce Dr. Ramya SN, Assistant Professor, School for Sustainable Development, to give the vote of thanks. Ma'am, please, the stage is yours. Okay. Yes.
Om Amrita Namaha, Namah to all. Greetings to all the esteemed speakers and attendees. I'm Ramya, working as an assistant professor in the School of Sustainable Development at Amrita University. I'm honored to deliver the vote of thanks for this virtual policy dialogue event on climate resilience, bridging the gap between multi-hazard modeling, technological solutions, and community capacity, organized by C20 India 2023 Working Group, Sustainable and Resilient Communities, Climate, Environment and Net Zero Targets, and also University of Trento, Italy. The theme of India's G20 presidency, Vasudha Kutumbakam, is drawn from the ancient Sanskrit text of the Maha Upanishad. It means one earth, one family, one future. It conveys a message of unity, resilience, and collective responsibility towards protecting our planet and ensuring the well-being of its inhabitants. Climate change is a global issue that affects everyone, and it requires collective action to effectively address it. It is indeed inspiring to hear our beloved Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has emphasized one speech of importance of bringing the discussions and outcomes of G20 meeting not only to the conference table but also to the dinner tables of people worldwide to address the challenges posed by the climate change. The working group under Civil 20 India 2023 remains committed to advocating evidence-based policy recommendations and strives towards the realization of Indian C20 movement. You are the light, as our beloved C20 Chair India 2023 Sri Mata Amritanandamayi Devi has said. When we try to love or serve without understanding those whom we are serving, we often end up harming society and ourselves. In order for service to be beneficial, it needs to go hand in hand with discernment. This is the essence of sustainable development. Enabling communities to be resilient to climate change is increasingly becoming a worldwide concern. However, there is a gap between scientific outcomes and technological interventions being adopted at the grassroots level or the last mile, that is, those that are most vulnerable. This calls for a close multi-stakeholders partnership between CSOs, academic and government institutions to bridge the gap between technological solutions and community resilience. The event today deliberated on these topics and has paved a way to explore the potential for partnership to address such complex social issues. Along with this, the conversation has delved around fostering a bridge between technology and social needs, placing emphasis on compassion-driven, people-centric research solutions. On this note, we would like to express our heartfelt thanks to Dr. Giuseppe Formetta for effectively moderating this event. He is an associate professor, Department of Civil, Environmental and Mechanical Engineering. Thanks a lot for your time and effort to make this event smooth and active. We would also like to thank our esteemed speakers for delivering such thoughtful, provoking, and distinguished address. Today we had speakers from multidisciplinary background. First, I would like to thank Dr. Lorenzo Giovannini, Associate Professor, Department of Civil, Environmental and Mechanical Engineering, University of Trento, Italy. He has given us broad ideas about microclimatic conditions and adaptation strategies over urban areas. Thanks a lot for your wonderful talk, sir. Then the next speaker was Dr. Vinitaa Apte, founder and director of Terre Policy Center, India. She addressed different issues in the community due to climate change. Thank you very much, ma'am, for a wonderful talk. Next was Dr. Sudesh K. Wadhawan, Adjunt Professor, Amrita Vidyapeetham, Amritapuri campus. He spoke about the different types of multi-hazards occurring due to climate change and their impact of community. Thank you, sir, for your wonderful talk. And the last speaker was Ms. Rini Dutt, Senior Manager, Vasudha Foundation, and she addressed the importance of mitigation in resilience building. It was very appealing. Thanks a lot for your thoughtful talk, ma'am. We would also like to express our heartfelt gratitude to the representatives from civil society organization and all the other participants who have joined us from different parts of the world. The points raised and discussed during the open house significantly valued in the driving policy related dialogues. Thank you very much for your immense support. All above, I humbly thank the C20 chair and world-renowned humanitarian leader, Sri Mata Amritanandamayi Devi, for her continuous guidance, support, and inspiration to lead such initiatives. Thank you once again, one and all. Om Namah Shivaya. I now pass the section to Mr. Hari Chantana for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and hope to see you for all future events leading up to the final C20 event in July, the C20 summit, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you, you too. Bye.